I previously posted this with a ton of detail about how I ended up with Oscar, but it was way too long and no one read it. I'm gonna try again with just the events surrounding the kidnapping. But just know that this is a sick and twisted man that I'd met online when I was 18 and ended up dating. He was jealous, controlling, vindictive, abusive in every possible way, and was filled with sadistic tendencies and rage. So I had tried to leave Oscar many times. I wasn't happy, in fact. I was in a constant state of panic and was absolutely miserable in the relationship that had lasted just a year. Each attempt to leave him was met with threats to hurt me and my family, physically dragging me back, sexually assaulting and purposely trying to impregnate me, threatening to commit suicide, or constant stalking and harassment until I surrendered. Finally, I had enough and decided I wasn't going back no matter what he did. He called my job nonstop and got me in major trouble, and did the same at my house, prompting me to unplug the phone line. He texted me to say he promised he was going to kill himself if I didn't go back to him. Instead of caving in, I called his mom at work and told her. She got a hold of him and said I must have misunderstood because he was clearly fine. I felt I'd done all I could do and told him I'd call the police next time he said something like that to have them go check on him. The next day, I got a call on my cell from Oscar. I rejected it. He called again and I rejected it again. Then I heard the loud exhaust on his car outside while I looked down at my phone and saw him calling again. I let it go to voicemail while I peeked through the blinds to check if I had truly heard his car, as I'd started to falsely hear it sometimes out of paranoia. But this time, he was indeed out in front of my house. My phone started ringing again, and wanting him to stop, I answered it. He told me to come outside. "I don't want to see you," I said. "Just come outside for a few minutes." "Please," Oscar said, making a huge effort to sound pleasant. "I told you to stop calling me and you show up at my house? Why can't you respect my wishes?" I asked, knowing the question wouldn't be addressed. I just felt bad about how everything went down and wanted to give you something I made for you before you broke up with me. "Just come out for a few minutes so I can apologize, and then I'll go away and you'll never hear from me again," Oscar pleaded. "I don't know. I don't trust you," I told him, looking at him sitting in his car through the living room window. "I promise," he said kind of convincingly. "I drove all the way here to give you what I made and just have a proper goodbye." In hindsight, I should have called BS on all of that immediately, but I was young and still way too controlled by my need to not hurt other people's feelings. I felt bad that he'd driven the 40 minutes to my house with something he'd made for me to just refuse to come out. "Fine. Only for a few minutes," I stated firmly. "And you promise you're not going to try to beg me back?" He promised, and I went outside. I opened the passenger side door and sat down in the seat, leaving the door wide open. He commented that I must think he's going to kidnap me, trying to pass it off like a joke. I told him I just wanted the legroom. He had a bouquet of flowers and some cases of DVDs he'd burned for me of all the seasons of my favorite TV show. We talked for a minute when my cell phone rang. I shouldn't have picked it up, knowing it was a guy from my job, but I was an idiot. I answered it and talked to the guy for less than 30 seconds. Oscar could hear it was a man's voice. I could instantly tell when I saw his head snap to attention in my peripheral vision. When I hung up, Oscar looked at me with fury in his eyes and asked some question about the caller that I can't even recall now. Before I could reply to whatever he asked, he had slammed on the accelerator and was flying down the street with my door still open. I instinctively pulled my legs into the vehicle and started screaming for him to stop. He didn't seem to even be hearing me. I tried to jump out when he slowed down at intersections, and seeing this, he grabbed my clothes with his hand to hold me in and started making sharp left turns through the neighborhood to force my door to swing shut. Once that was accomplished, I tried to open the door again and he kept hitting the automatic locks to stop me and was consistently increasing his speed to ensure any leap from the car would be dangerous. By now it was dark outside. He was speeding through my town, double the speed limit. I was hoping a police officer would see this and start tailing him and pull him over, but apparently he'd gone unseen. He reached the freeway and I started really panicking. He would be able to go even faster here and fast-track me wherever he planned to take me. It took maybe 3 minutes to get to the freeway at the speed he was going, all of which I spent trying to get out of the vehicle. Once he was on the freeway, he was going over 100 miles per hour. Kept looking at the speedometer. It was dark outside and that was much too fast to jump from a moving car on the freeway, with other cars driving at high speeds and unable to see me. I still had my phone, so I tried to dial 911. I pressed the numbers with my hand shoved down the side of the seat by my window, away from Oscar, but he saw what I was doing and started swerving all over the road while trying to grab my phone. I still don't really know how he managed to get it away from me because every ounce of my being was trying to hold on. He took it, rolled down his window, and threw it out. Rolling his window back up, he flatly stated, "If I can't have you, then no one will." That sentence made my heart sink. I felt like I was in a Lifetime movie. Oscar was possessed by his need to possess me, and I was trapped. This is when the grim reality started to really set in. He was out of control and I was out of options. I started screaming for help and pounding on the windows, but Oscar had the tint on those windows so dark that I probably wouldn't have even been seen if it wasn't dark outside. I watched as the people in each car we passed remained blissfully unaware of the chaos going on in the car I was being kidnapped in. I was feeling very defeated but was running through all the possibilities of how this could go over and over in my mind, trying to figure out how to survive. I decided to stop fighting and acting afraid because the only way I saw myself making it out of this alive was by feeding into Oscar's delusional state. I had no other weapons or means of escape at my disposal, so I decided on psychological warfare. Oscar had this friend named Jose that he'd gotten exceedingly close to over the course of our relationship. After a time, it was revealed to me in confidence that Jose had fled from Puerto Rico, supposedly on the run for murder. I saw Oscar was taking the necessary freeway interchanges to get to Jose's place, and knew that even if his friend hadn't really been wanted for murder, he was the type of guy who would do anything for Oscar without moral restriction. Jose and I got along okay, but I knew he'd have no loyalty to me whatsoever. He was nice to me as long as I was an extension of Oscar. I had to act quickly. I proceeded to tell Oscar that I loved him and wished we could be together, but that I didn't see how it could ever work when things like what he was doing right now proved that he never cared about what I wanted. I hadn't necessarily cited that as a reason for wanting out of the relationship before, as it was much more complex than that, but I was hoping it was enough to offer him hope in his state of desperation. I told him I had been considering giving him another chance when I saw the flowers and DVDs, but now that he was refusing to take me home when I asked him to, I was starting to second-guess things. Oscar got off the freeway on Jose's exit, and I started trying to formulate a plan for when the car stopped. I knew Jose had neighbors close by, and I decided I was going to run as fast as I could and scream at the top of my lungs. I was trying to keep Oscar's mind preoccupied in the meantime, though, so that he wouldn't think to call Jose and give him a heads up. They usually spoke to each other in Spanish, so I would have no idea what was even said. Oscar told me that he did care about what I wanted, and asked if he still had a chance with me if he turned around right now. In an effort to not expose myself with an overly enthusiastic reply, I hesitated a bit and said I thought we could probably work it out and this would be a good place to start. Oscar looped around and got back on the freeway, headed in the opposite direction, back toward my house. The rest of the ride was tense because Oscar was normally so perceptive and I didn't want to reveal myself and end up back in the line of fire. I can't recall what was said on the commute back, but I opted to talk about regular everyday things I'd normally say to him in casual conversation. When we got back to my house and he let me open my door and didn't stop me from leaving, I could finally breathe. I got out, taking the flowers and DVDs with me, and waved to him before walking into my house. I walked straight to the garbage bin and threw it all in the trash and then collapsed on my couch, shaking violently but ultimately so grateful to have made it home. The next day I went to the police station and filed a restraining order against him. Within a few years, he would be jailed for other appalling crimes and sentenced to 60 years. Until I found that out, I never truly felt safe. He's definitely where he belongs. So, psychopath I dated that kidnapped me and was likely going to murder me, let's not meet again. What do you think of this crazy story? Let me know in the comments below.